Hey guys, it's Alexandra from EyeLoveKnots.com and CreationCrochet.com. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make the Grace Tinley Scarf. This is worked in the classic granny stitch pattern, but it is my Grace Tinley series. I'm going to be providing instructions to work 4 sizes: toddler, child, adult small, and adult large. I've worked my scarf in 3 different colors so I could have a fun color block pattern. That's 3 different shades of green here. But you could work yours in stripes or in a solid color or use a variegated yarn. A lot of different options here. I've used Red Heart Super Saver for my scarf. You can use your favorite worsted weight yarn, any worsted weight yarn that you have in your stash that you like to make scarves with. Gauge is not terribly essential unless the finished size is essential to you. And because this is worked in rows, it's really easy to adjust the width after just a couple rows, and you can just work until you reach the length that you want. You don't even have to count if you don't want to. If you're going to do a color block pattern like this or striped pattern, you're going to want to make sure that all your sections are even. But if you're working with a variegated yarn or one solid color, you can just use a soft tape measure as you go and stop when you get to the length that you want or when you run out of yarn, depending on the yarn that you're using. The easiest way to take gauge for the scarf is going to be just by measuring the width of the scarf. That's going to be the finished size of your scarf, and you'll want to measure it after at least 5 or 6 rows. So after you get started, work about 5 or 6 rows, you can measure it and then go from there. If you're happy with the size, you can just go ahead and continue. If it is smaller than you want, either you can add a border. I did not add a border to my scarf. I am going to show you at the end how to add a border if you want. But if the scarf is smaller than you want, you can add a border, or you can take it out, add more chains, and then continue in pattern. If the scarf is too large, you can take out chains and then continue in pattern. Together with this worsted weight yarn, we're going to be using an H8 5mm crochet hook. This is my favorite crochet hook that I got from Sienna's Boutique on Etsy. I will link it in the description box below if you're interested. There's a lot of flexibility in scarves, so if you're working with a yarn that you prefer to work with a larger crochet hook, like an I9 5.5mm hook, you can do that too. They're building a house across the street from me, so if you can hear that, I apologize. I'm going to go ahead and provide instructions within this pattern for how many chains you're going to need depending on the size that you're working and how many rows. I've already worked my entire scarf up, so the tutorial is just going to be showing how to do a small sample. You're also going to find the written pattern for it linked in the description box below. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with a slip knot. So I've pulled the yarn over my fingers here. I'm going to wrap it around my index finger 2 times. Hold the tension with my thumb and my middle finger. Pull the loop on the left up over the other one but not off my finger. Then I'll pull the loop on the left up over the other one and off my finger. I'm going to grab my crochet hook, insert it into the loop on my finger and pull it off. Hold the working yarn in my right hand, and with my left hand I'm going to pull the short tail end so this knot goes to normal tension. I'm going to show you how to work a couple chains, and then we'll go over how many chains you're going to need for your project. To chain, we yarn over and pull through the loop on our hook. Yarn over, pull through the loop on your hook. Yarn over, pull through the loop on your hook. That creates these V shapes right here, and each one of those V shapes is a chain. So we have 1, 2, 3 chains. If you want to make this smaller or larger, the chain multiple is 3 plus 1. So you'll take the final number of chains that you have, you'll subtract 1, and that number that you're left with is going to be evenly divisible by 3. Another easy way to look at it is to take the number of chains that I'm providing and either take away 3 at a time or add 3 at a time. I'll go ahead and put up a chart now that shows how many chains you're going to want to have depending on the size that you're working. I'm just going to be working a small sample here since I've already worked up my entire project, so your chain might be longer than mine. There are two ways that you can start this, and it depends on your preference. You can work into the center of the chains as I'm about to show you. And then you may want to add a border afterwards so that it will give you a clean edge. Or you can work into the back bump along the back of the chain, that center bump, which would give you a clean edge as the chain would sort of twist on itself and those pretty V shapes that you have would be flat on the bottom. So it would look like a nice clean edge without the need for a border. Now there are several times where I will work a project right into the center of the V and not put a border on it, and I'm perfectly happy with the way that it looks. So it's completely up to you. If you do want to work into the back bump, you're going to count the same way from the front side as you do the back side. We're going to be working a double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. We don't count the loop that's on our hook. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4 chains. So if you wanted to work into the back, you would work into that same exact stitch just from the opposite side. Yarn over, insert your hook in between, picking up just that middle bump on your hook. When you push through the middle here, you're going to leave the 2 legs of the V underneath your hook. So you push through the middle, just picking up that back bump on your hook, and then you complete your double crochet as normal, and you would do that all the way across. I'm not going to do that here, but that is an option for you. I'm going to double crochet into the front of the chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, yarn over, insert my hook into the center, yarn over and pull through, 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Then we'll work another double crochet right into the same exact stitch, yarn over, insert your hook into the center of the V, yarn over and pull through, 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Let me pull up a loop here so I don't lose this. The skipped chains that we have here in the beginning are going to count as our first double crochet. Then we have the 2 double crochets that we added, and together that makes 3 double crochets, which is our first cluster. Each cluster is going to be 3 stitches. Once we work the second row, this is going to even out. You'll see that this bottom side is going to come down a little bit, and it will be straight here on the edge. We're going to skip each of the next 2 chains along the bottom, and in that next chain, which is going to be the 3rd one, we're going to work 3 double crochets. Yarn over, insert your hook into the center of the chain, yarn over and pull through, 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Now I'll work 2 more double crochets into that same exact chain. And that's going to complete our second cluster here with 3 stitches. And we have that space here in the middle between them. That's exactly what we want. And that's where we're going to work the stitches from the next row. We're going to continue working this pattern, skip each of the next 2 chains, and in the next chain you're going to work 3 double crochets. And again, if you're working from the back side, you'll be doing the 3 stitches right into that back bump. I'm just working from the front side here. You continue repeating this all the way across until you have just 3 chains left. Once you get to the end and you have these 3 chains left, you're going to skip each of those next 2 chains, and in the very last chain you're going to work just 1 double crochet. And that's going to complete your row. And I find that as I work these gaps that you see here, They fill in from the yarn after it gets a chance to relax, and then those gaps really aren't noticeable. So if you wanted to make this more even or cover that up completely, you could add a border afterwards. As I mentioned before, many times I'll work this stitch pattern and not work a border and not work into the back bump of the chain. I just work right into the center of the chain as I've showed you here. But it does depend on the yarn that I'm using, it does depend on the project that I'm using, it depends how I feel that day, sometimes I change it up. So it's completely up to you which way you'd like to take it. We have our foundation done. Now all the remaining rows are going to be worked exactly the same as this next row. We're going to start with a chain 2. This chain 2 counts as our first double crochet, and we're going to turn our work. We're going to work into those spaces in between the clusters that was created by skipping those stitches. So we're going to start by working 2 double crochets into this very first space to complete our first cluster. We're going to yarn over, insert our hook right into the center of that space, just underneath where you can see the 2 legs from the stitch above, right into the center of that space, picking up that stitch on your hook. So it's going to be sitting right on top of your hook, and your hook is going to be right in the center of the space. Then yarn over, pull through, and complete your double crochet as normal. Yarn over, insert your hook right into the center of that space, the same as you did before, and complete your double crochet. And then that chain 2 in the beginning is going to count as the first double crochet, and that's what makes 3 stitches there in the beginning. Now we're going to skip the 3 double crochets from that next cluster that you see there, and in that next space in between those next 2 clusters, that's where we're going to work our next cluster. So you're going to yarn over, insert your hook right into the center of that space, and once you do that, you're going to have that stitch sitting right on top of your hook, and complete your double crochet. We want 3 double crochets in total, working all of them into that space in between the clusters. And 3 stitches together makes a cluster. We're going to continue working in pattern, skipping each of those double crochets from the cluster, and then working 3 double crochets right into that space in between the clusters. Repeat this all the way across until you come to the last cluster. And here at the end, you're going to skip the very first 2 double crochets, and in the last stitch, the top of that beginning chain, you're going to work 1 double crochet. So skip these first 2 double crochets. In the very next stitch, which is the top chain of the beginning chain, insert your hook right into the center of it, and complete your double crochet. And that completes row 2. Each row that we have left is going to be worked the same as row 2. But as you work, your clusters are going to be staggered. Where in the previous row you have the 1 double crochet over here on the right, here in the second row we finish with the 1 double crochet on the left. Now we'll chain 2, which is going to count as the first double crochet of the next cluster, turn our work, and we're going to work 2 double crochets into that very first space, and together with that beginning chain 2, our first cluster is complete. Skip the next 3 double crochets from the next cluster and work 3 double crochets into that space in between those next 2 clusters. Skip the next 3 double crochets of that cluster, and in the space after that in between those next 2, that's where you're going to work your next set of 3 double crochets. And you're going to continue in this pattern all the way down until you have reached the last cluster. And for that very last cluster, you're going to skip the very first 2 stitches. In that very last stitch, which is the top chain of the beginning chain 2, the very next stitch after that middle double crochet that's most natural to go to, that's where you're going to work your next stitch. So right in the center of that chain and complete a double crochet. And you do just 1 here at the end. And there we have 3 rows complete. You're going to continue repeating this second row for as many rows as you need for your project. Before we jump into how many rows you're going to need, I want to go ahead and show you how to change colors. So I'm going to pull out this very last double crochet. We're going to switch colors in the last yarn over of the previous stitch. So I want my color to change in the next row. We work up until we get to the very last stitch of this previous row. Yarn over, insert our hook into the last stitch as normal. Yarn over and pull through. 3 loops are on our hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. We have 2 loops left on our hook, and we're going to pause here. This is the last step of this last stitch. This is where we're going to change colors. So I'm going to set this down for a moment. I'm grabbing my new color, which is going to be this light brown. I'm going to create a loop here towards the end, leaving a tail end long enough I can comfortably weave in. I'm going to hold the tension of these loops with my finger here, and I'm going to put that loop onto my hook. This is going to count as the last yarn over of this double crochet. Now when I pull it through those 2 loops, that's going to complete the double crochet in the blue color, but it's going to leave the brown color on my hook so that I'm in the perfect position to start with it for this next row. So I'll go ahead and chain 2 with this new color, turn my work, and now I'm ready to go with my 2 double crochets into this very first space. And then I'll just tighten this up a little bit so that everything looks like it's consistent with the rest of it. And you can fasten off your yarn, or if you're going to work in stripes, you can leave your yarn there and carry it up for the next row, or a couple rows depending on how many you're going to do. If you run out of yarn in the middle of one of your rows, you're going to follow the same technique, switching to the new ball of yarn in the last yarn over of the previous stitch in any stitch in the row, and then you'll want to keep all your tail ends on what's going to be your wrong side of the fabric, or the back side. That way you can weave them all in on the one side. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and put up a chart that shows how many rows you're going to want to have depending on the size that you're working. If you don't want to add a border to your finished project, you can fasten off at any time once you get to the size that you're happy with. If you wanted to add a border to your finished project, I'll go ahead and show you how to do a simple round of single crochet. If you're following along with my gauge, this is going to add about 1/2 inch to the width and to the height. And you can work as many rounds as you want. I'm just going to show you the foundation round. With a project like this, that it doesn't matter if the front is the right side or if the back is the right side, because we've turned at the end of each row. You'll just want to make sure that all your tail ends are going to be on the same side, and that's going to be the side that's facing you right now as you've finished. So you can pull all your tails through to this side if you need to, or you can do it before you weave them in. But we're going to chain 1 and turn, and I like the side that's facing when I begin my border to be the right side, so that's why I've chosen this as the front, because I like how defined the stitches look for the border. If you don't put a border on your project, any side can be the right side or the wrong side, it doesn't matter. To do a single crochet border, you're going to start by working 1 single crochet into the very first stitch. So you're going to insert your hook into that stitch, picking up both loops of the V, yarn over, pull through. There are 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through both loops. Insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull through, 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through both loops. Insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull through, 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through both loops. This gives us these shorter stitches here. These are single crochets. Each one of those V shapes along the top is going to be a stitch. And we're going to continue working all the way across. We're not going to be inserting our hook into the space in between the clusters. We're going to work into the stitches themselves. So you'll insert your hook into this next double crochet as normal, picking up the 2 legs from that V shape on the top. And continue single crocheting into each stitch, not spaces, each stitch all the way across until you get to the very last one. So here I've made it across. I have one more stitch left to work into the top chain of the beginning chain 2 of that last stitch. In the corners, which is going to be the last stitch, we're going to increase. That means we're going to add multiple stitches into the same stitch so that the corners will lay flat. If you just work one stitch in there, then they're going to go ahead and take a bowl shape. They're not going to lay flat. So I'm going to work my first single crochet as normal into that top chain. And then I'm going to chain 1 and work one more single crochet back into that same exact stitch. And that's going to be my increase. 3 stitches worked into that very last stitch. And depending on how you work this, it will give you a different shape. So this is going to give me a more rounded shape, or you could do 3 single crochets for a similar rounded shape. If you want more of a square shape here, then you could do single crochet, chain 2, single crochet, or single crochet, half double crochet, single crochet. Whichever way you choose to do it, you'll just want to make sure you do it on all of your corners. And we're going to work the increase here for this first one when we come back around. When you're working up and down the sides, you're going to work as close to the side edge as possible. So we're going to be inserting our hooks into the center of the stitches here. You don't want to work into the space in between the stitches or into the open space here from the clusters, because it's going to create an unevenness here and it's going to create large holes where it's going to look lacy along the sides. So you're going to want to work as close to the side edge as possible. The rule for working into the side of a double crochet is 2 stitches per double crochet. So we already have one here at the top. We're going to work one more here into this next stitch, and this is going to look like the back bump of a double crochet. You're going to insert your hook right into the center of it, picking up just that one loop on your hook, and complete your double crochet. Here we're going to have 2 single crochets worked into this next double crochet. The first one is going to be worked here at the top, and then we're going to work another one here at the bottom. So we're going to insert our hook into this next stitch, right into the center of the stitch. When you do that, you're going to have 2 loops on your hook. It's going to look like a V shape. You have 2 loops there, and you have 1 loop underneath your hook. And complete your single crochet. You've just broken that stitch in half in the center, and then completed your single crochet. You'll do the same thing for the next one, inserting your hook right into the center of that stitch, and when you do that, you'll have 2 loops on your hook that'll look like the V shape, and you'll have a leg on the bottom, and complete your single crochet. And that's our 2 stitches per double crochet. We're going to continue like that all the way down. Here we'll insert a hook into the center of that next stitch, picking up the 2 loops on the edge. That's the first stitch, and then insert your hook into the center of that next stitch, which is of the same double crochet, and complete your single crochet. And for this stitch I just did it with 1 loop on my hook, and it's like working into the back bump. And the reason why the stitches look a little bit different between these 2 rows is because we're looking at the front of the stitch here and the back of the stitch here. Then we'll be looking at the front of the stitch in the next one, and then the back of the stitch because the rows are turned. So just work breaking the stitch in half, working as close to the side edge as you can, picking up the loops on your hook. I try to go for 2 loops if I can, just so that it adds a little bit more stability there. And you'll continue working all the way until you get to the very end. And once you get to the very end, then we're going to increase again so that we can have a corner that matches this other one that we worked up here. So I have one more single crochet to work here to finish this last set on the bottom. And then in the cornermost chain, I'm going to go ahead and work a single crochet, chain 1, single crochet. So here for this last row, I've worked a single crochet into each of those parts of that last double crochet, and I've worked my corner into the next chain on the bottom. Then you're going to work into the center of the chains the same way as you did before, inserting your hook right into the center, this time just working 1 stitch into each chain. Inserting your hook right into the very center of the chain, all the way until you get to the very last chain. And here I've reached the last chain. I'm going to work an increase of single crochet, chain 1, single crochet. And again, if you've changed your other corners, you'll just want to make that to match. I'm going to push my tail into the back. This hole may open up here because that slip knot is not secured yet. You can hold it and pull on that tail end and it will close it back up. And then I'll start working back up here, working 2 stitches per edge of the double crochets. Once you get here, if you've changed colors or you ran out of yarn and had to add it, just push your tails to the back as you work and you can weave those in later. And then once we get to the very beginning, we have 1 single crochet there from where we started. We'll work 1 more single crochet into that very first stitch. And then I'm not going to chain 1 here because we're going to slip stitch join, which is going to take the place. It's going to be the same width here. So we're just going to do a slip stitch join here. Insert our hook into the very first stitch, picking up both loops. Yarn over, pull through that stitch and through the loop that's on our hook. That is a slip stitch join, and that's going to complete a round, as well as the corner here. Now we're going to leave a tail end long enough that we can comfortably weave in. Take our scissors and cut it. Then you'll pull up on your loop until that strand comes all the way out. Insert your hook from the back to the front into the stitch that you just slip stitched to. Yarn over with the tail end and pull it through so it's on the back side and it's easy to weave in from that other side. If you wanted to add additional rounds to the border before fastening off, you absolutely can do that. Just chain 1 if you're working in single crochet or half double crochet and work all the way around. Chain 2 if you want to work in double crochet. The same way that we increased in all our corners, you'll want to make sure that you increase in the chain space for any additional rounds that you add to this. And that's it. I'll go ahead and pop in a clip showing how to weave in your ends. We're going to start here where you have the 2 strands because you've run out of yarn or had a problem with your yarn and you had to attach another ball. Anywhere in the middle of your project, or even on the edge. All my ends, I'm going to do them the same way. Not just here, but the beginning and end as well. I always weave in vertically and not horizontally, so I'm going to weave into the stitches, moving in a vertical direction down and up, as opposed to horizontally through the bulk of the cluster. I think it's a lot easier to hide your ends if you weave them vertically, And in projects where the stretch matters, it doesn't matter so much in this project, but in projects where the stretch matters, like in a beanie, you'd want to go vertically so that it doesn't prohibit any of the stretch widthwise around the head. When I enter and exit, instead of picking up the whole entire stitch on my needle, I'm going to insert my needle into the center of it, breaking it in half, and that's going to help capture my yarn better. I do 3 passes, that's my magic number, that's what I feel the most comfortable with. Depending on the yarn that you're working with, you can feel comfortable after 2 or sometimes after 4, so it's whatever you feel the most secure with your ends. So I'm going to go ahead and start by threading my tapestry needle here. I'm at the top of this stitch. I'm going to go ahead and weave this one into the double crochet that's above it. So even though I'm right here at the top of the stitch, I'm going to come down to the left diagonally here to the middle of this next stitch. And that's where I'm going to insert my needle here, breaking the stitch in half. And then I'm going to work up vertically through several of the stitches there. And when I exit, I'm going to break the stitch in half. Then I like to hold the fabric in between my fingers, and between my thumb and my middle finger, and pull the needle through. This is going to help prevent some of the bunching. I'm going to give it a tug. I'm going to use my fingers to manipulate the fabric if I need to. If it has bunched up, I want it to lay naturally. And then I'm ready to go for my next pass. I'll insert into a stitch right above it, breaking it in half, run back through several of those same stitches I just finished, and break my last stitch in half when I exit. Then hold the fabric in between my fingers, pull the needle through, give it a tug, manipulate the fabric. That's the second pass. One more here, inserting into a nearby stitch, breaking it in half, up through the same several stitches, breaking my last stitch in half as I exit. Hold the fabric in between my fingers, pull it through, give it a tug, manipulate the fabric. Now I feel comfortable with that, I can go ahead and fasten off. Now I'll do the same thing with this other end from where I attached it there, but I'll be working downward, and pretty much all of the ends are going to be worked like this. We're going to come here to the beginning. This is the tail end from my beginning chain. This one is a little bit different, and the last one is a little bit different if you haven't added a border. If you've added a border, it's really easy to just pull it to the wrong side and weave it down into the cluster. So let's go ahead and thread it into our tapestry needle. And here, I want to try to mimic the look of the stitches on the side, working through the side of the stitch there, just to get it into position so that I can work upward without it distorting my edge. So the side that's facing me is my wrong side. This is where I want the needle to come up so that I can work through the stitch. So the first step is going to be working down, and then the second step will be working up so we can get it back on this wrong side. So here at the bottom is where my tail end is coming out of the bottom chain before that double crochet. I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to insert it from the wrong side to the right side, staying on the edge of that double crochet into the middle of the stitch. So the stitch has like a bottom part and a top part. I'm going to insert right into the middle of that. And when I do that, it's also going to be in the middle of the stitches. So here on the bottom, you can see there's a right leg and a left leg. So I want the needle to go right in the middle of both of those legs, in the middle point of that double crochet. From the wrong side, which is the side I'm looking at, to the right side. And then I'll pull it through. Now as you pull here, it's going to pull that bottom corner up. So I like to hold it in between my fingers, give it a nice tug, then use my fingers to manipulate the fabric if I need to bring that corner back down so it looks like it's laying naturally. Now this is going to create the left leg here on the side. We're going to bring it now so it creates a right leg, so it looks like a V shape there, matches the rest of the stitches you see. We're going to insert from the front side, which is at the bottom now, through, so we're coming from the bottom up. And we want to do that in the very bottom stitch of the chain. So looking at this double crochet, you see the bottom part of the double crochet there. You want to insert your needle into the chain below that, right into that little point there where you can see your double crochet coming out of. So I'm going to go to the back side, insert my needle, and come out that little stitch right there. Then I'll hold the fabric, I'll pull it through, give it a tug, manipulate the fabric if you need to, and now it's pretty much invisible there, and I'm now in a better position to weave this in. So I can either go through the chains here and go up into this cluster, or I can go straight up into this cluster, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to insert into a nearby stitch here, breaking it in half, run it up through that stitch into the next cluster above it, and break my last stitch in half. Hold the fabric, pull it through, give it a tug, manipulate the fabric. And that's my first pass. So I'll just go ahead and continue 2 more passes so that I have my 3. And again, you just want to manipulate the fabric so that it pulls down that corner so it lays naturally with all the rest of it. And then you can fasten off. And looking from the right side, it's an invisible weave right there, and it doesn't distort your corner. You're going to do the same thing at the end where you fastened off your yarn. If you've added a border, you're not going to need to do this step, because there's going to be a row or multiple rows of stitches. You're going to have your tail end just sitting on the back side, and you'll have plenty of fabric to work into either through the border or easily into the clusters without distorting your edges. I do this when I need extra support at the edges so that it doesn't distort the shape. And that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and weave in the rest of my ends off camera. Guys, thanks so much for watching my video. I hope you liked this one. This is one of my favorite stitch patterns. I'll link some other projects that you can make to match it if you're interested in the description box below. And remember, you'll find the written pattern for this there as well. Please hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.